Good day and welcome to Of Many Things. I'm Father Matt Malone. I'm the editor-in-chief of America Magazine. Thousands of private schools and nearly 2 million private school families are requiring assistance as a result of COVID-19 and the accompanying economic catastrophe. And according to figures released by the National Center for Education Statistics, almost 6 million students attend almost 35,000 private schools across the country, which is 10% of all of the nation's students and almost 25% of all of the nation's schools. And crucially, approximately 30% of families with students enrolled in private school have an income of less than $75,000 and also often have children with disabilities. And that is one of the reasons why on May 18th, Catholic leaders expressed deep reservations about the fact that a new $3 trillion tax cut and spending bill in response to the economic fallout caused by the coronavirus pandemic would restrict support for private schools, including for Catholic school students. That bill, the so-called CARES 2, has passed the House and is pending in the U.S. Senate. Jennifer Daniels serves as the Associate Director for Public Policy for the Secretariat of Catholic Education at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. In this capacity, she represents Catholic schools, the nation's largest private K-12 educator. She represents them before Congress and the executive branch on matters of federal education policy. Jennifer, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So I wonder if you could, for our listeners and our viewers, just give them a brief overview of what is happening here and what is at stake.
Absolutely. The HEROES Act, as you mentioned, did pass the House. It included three provisions that are really antagonistic towards the private school community. First of all, it allowed for no new funding or services to be provided to non-public schools that are included in the education fund of the HEROES Act. Secondly, it actually went into the CARES Act retroactively and limited the access for non-public schools participation in the CARES Act. Already passed the Senate, and those funds are currently being distributed by the United States Department of Education. And then third, it put an extra line in there to say nothing in this bill could be construed to be eligible for direct assistance, such as scholarships for families in non-public schools.
So what we have here is, the U.S. Congress doing its job, responding to a national emergency, trying to, funnel monies in the right direction to get the country stable and moving again. Funding to private education has been a part of federal funding for decades. It was part of the original package that the Congress passed a couple of months ago. What changed? Why was aid to private schools and including Catholic schools taken out of this House bill?
Well, I hate to be, highly political or partisan, but the reality is that there was a lot of political activism that reached out to insist changes. This, like you said, has been a bipartisan agreement for many, many years. Since 1965, Catholic schools have had access to federal education programs and services. And we are in such a highly partisan political environment right now. Our opponents have gone so far, not just to not want to provide, scholarships or direct funding, things like that, that would be more direct, but to take away this very long tradition of equitable services. And unfortunately, I think it is simply a result of the highly polarized political environment we're in right now.
So it's your impression that there are special interests at work here who really want to see all of the funds go to public education? There. Yeah. So I guess, we've heard this argument in the discussion of this story. There is this distinction between public and private education. And a number of people say, why should public money go to private education or to Catholic schools? How do you respond to that question?
Well, in this instance, we're in the middle of a national pandemic. This bill is an emergency relief bill. It's not just an education bill. So, for that reason, obviously, all children and students and schools who are in the middle of suffering from this pandemic should have access to the federal relief services associated with that. This is not a new idea either. We have participated in many federal disaster relief bills in the past, all the way back to Hurricane Katrina, as recently as Hurricane Maria, and even the California wildfires. So there's always been a full understanding that when there's an emergency and when Congress is reacting to give relief, that everybody suffering should be a part of that emergency relief package.
Mhm. But even as you pointed out, even in ordinary times outside of a crisis like this, this has not usually been controversial. There has been a long-standing, decades-long bipartisan agreement to provide equitable funding for private and public schools, right?
Absolutely. And the reason is that these programs are all really targeted to the child, to the student. So at no point do Catholic schools actually receive a check from the federal government. The school does not get the funding. The funding is implemented as services to our students and to our teachers of those students. And even in that case, there are clear restrictions on which students are eligible. So the Title I program is specifically tied to children from low-income households. We have an English language program that is tied to children that English is not their first language. And then, of course, for children with special needs, the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is targeted towards the needs of children with special needs. And so therefore, all of those programs are meant by Congress to meet the needs of children. And for that reason, Congress has said we want to meet the needs of all those children, no matter where they go to school.
You know, it seems to me, too, that one of the reasons why it's in the public interest to restore this funding, this equitable funding, is because, you know, we are talking about 10% of the nation's students, right, who attend private schools. And a lot of those schools, particularly in Catholic school systems, are really under threat right now because there were pre-existing conditions, as it were, economic and otherwise, that had a lot of these schools on the margins and wondering about their future. And then this crisis comes along, and we heard in the Archdiocese of Newark that 10 schools had closed there, including the Cristo Rey School. I mean, if all of those schools close, then those students need someplace to go, right? I mean, and the public school system would have to absorb them, and it's already overburdened. So it seems like there is a public interest here, an additional public interest in supporting this.
Well, absolutely. We obviously see a emergency relief as a part of the HEROES Act for state and local governments because they are incurring in huge debt right now due to this pandemic. And if private school children have to leave their schools because they're closed and go into the public school system, they are going to be absorbing the cost. And just for Catholic schools alone, we're looking at about $24 billion in savings across the country that could potentially have to be absorbed by state and local governments who are currently running out of money as is.
Mm-hmm. So what are the U.S. bishops doing right now to address this issue and to make sure that funding is restored?
Well, the bishops have made this a very high priority of their advocacy right now. I feel like it's an all hands on deck mentality at the USCCB to address the crisis facing Catholic education. Chairman Michael Barber from California is the chairman of our committee, and he has been in close contact with members of Congress as well as Secretary DeVos at the United States Department of Education. Many other bishops have been reaching out to their local elected officials to share with them the realities of what's going on the ground and to help them put a picture to who we serve and who is being impacted by this pandemic. The potential of schools closing, our families being unable to work, our families losing their jobs, but trying their best to make tuition work at the same time. And then, of course, the devastating closure of churches and mass across the country has limited access to Sunday collections, which in many cases subsidize our Catholic schools so that we can keep the cost low for our Catholic families. So it's been a kind of triple whammy for Catholic schools. And so we've really been trying to get that message across to elected officials across the country. And we just, in a tangible way, did release an action alert that you can find on our website at usccb.org, where we are encouraging all Catholics across the country to reach out to their members of Congress and request that Catholic schools are in any future education stimulus package.
And I would encourage people to check out that alert at USCCB because a billion years ago, I used to work for Congress, and I can tell you that congressmen and their staffs pay attention when they get a lot of calls and a lot of emails and a lot of messages about something. So if it's something that moves you and you feel strongly about, don't think it will make a difference, because it certainly will. Now, presuming that this funding is restored and we find our way through this crisis, what are more generally the challenges that we face vis-a-vis our national politics, our national legislature, and Catholic schools going forward?
Well, our big message to elected officials is that we need to provide resources directly to the family so that they can make the best decisions on behalf of their children. And we have been advocating for direct aid to families, which would potentially be in the form of a scholarship that could be in an emergency context, a one-time opportunity for a scholarship program. But then we have also been advocating for that to be paired with the creation or expansion of scholarship granting organizations across this country that are already very active, and providing a federal tax credit for donations to those scholarship granting organizations to strengthen access for families to scholarships. We've also been advocating for tax policy changes that would allow for parents who are paying out of pocket for tuition to get a tax credit or deduction on their tax bill. They are paying taxes twice here, and so for them to get something back from that would be really beneficial for our families. And we do continue to advocate at the federal level, but at the state level, there's tons of action going on, led by our amazing Catholic conferences in all of our states across the country, where they are working to expand access to private school for families through various school choice measures. And we definitely see it's an important state priority. That's how our education system works here. Most of the funding is actually at the state level. So it's really vital that we have a strong state advocacy on this issue on behalf of our families as well.
Now, I'm sure that some of the folks watching are asking, is what you're talking about similar to what they hear about in the news about school vouchers and that sort of thing?
Well, there's lots of names you can call these things, but right. We have education savings accounts, which are where families can use those funds for any education need. So we're always kind of advocating for the most broad ability. Vouchers typically are exclusively for tuition, so that's great in certain places. And then when we have an organization or a state pass a scholarship tax credit bill, that allows private dollars to fund the scholarships, but then those donors get the tax credit. So in that case, that's very different from a voucher because there's no federal or state taxpayer dollars funding that scholarship. It's funded by private money, and that tax benefit is there. So we are supportive of all of those options, whatever you want to call it. We are supportive of anything that gives families more access and more control over their child's education.
Sure, and that's always been the long time position of the U.S. Catholic bishops I know.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems to me that I'm also asked this question from time to time. Isn't there a separation of church and state? Don't we have public and private, and those spheres should remain separate? And my response is, look, in this congressional action in the last couple of months, we've given billions and billions and billions of dollars. I think the right thing to do, to private businesses all over this country. And because they have an impact on working people, on families, on the economic health of our communities, which then has reverberations throughout that touch upon the public good. So it does seem like an arbitrary distinction that all of a sudden, as we come to talk about aid to education, we are invoking a distinction that we weren't talking about before when we were talking about businesses.
Well, absolutely. And the key to the mechanics of this, though, is that in all of these cases, the money, the funds, whether they're state or federal, up to this point, every single program, the money goes to the families, to the parents, and the parents get to choose where are they going to take that money. So again, the Catholic schools are not receiving checks in the mail from the government at the state or the federal level. They are receiving families who have chosen them as the education school of their choice. So we have that kind of intersection there that keeps this the federal money is not going straight. It's not funding our religious in a religious institution. It's giving parents the choice, and some parents choose Catholic schools, and some parents choose another school down the road. So that is, and the courts have actually held that up quite strongly over the past years when we've had challenges to these types of programs. The courts recognizing that parents have the right to choose the school of their choice and distinguishing that doesn't interfere with the church and state.
And that's an important piece, isn't it? Because people shouldn't have the idea that churches or individual bishops or individual parishes are somehow being subsidized by the federal government. No, these are funds that are being, as you say, made available to families who then choose to spend that however they wish, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one question that I had for you, just shifting gears a little bit, is I know you're a real passionate advocate for this work, and how did you come to do this work? And what motivated you to become an advocate?
Well, it was not a linear process, let me tell you. As to start with, I'm actually a convert to Catholicism, and I grew up Baptist in a very wonderful Christian home. And my parents sent me to Catholic school when I was in junior high. And I learned a lot about the Catholic faith there, but kind of just kept going with my life. And in college, decided to convert to Catholicism, primarily because I really enjoyed going to Mass, and I remembered going to Mass as a 7th and 8th grader and wanted to get back to that, the beauty of the Mass. So as my kind of career evolved, I was always involved. I was an education major, I was a teacher, but wanted to be involved in politics and advocacy on behalf of education. And so found the world of school choice and the world of, parent access and parents' rights and things of that nature. And being able to pair my love of politics and my love of advocacy with the Catholic Church is just absolutely a dream come true. So I feel so blessed every day. And the days that are hard and tough and long are still enjoyable because I know we're making a difference, and I know the impact that Catholic schools make in the lives of children. And there's nothing more important worth fighting for.
Well, I can say from my own experience, I know how long your days are, and it's a lot of blocking the family. So thank you very much for your work on behalf of the Church, on behalf of the U.S. Catholic Bishops. Jennifer Daniels is the Associate Director for Public Policy for the Secretariat of Catholic Education at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops in Washington, D.C. Jennifer, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. So as you probably can tell if you have been watching each of these live streams each week, we have been examining different dimensions of the crisis that we are facing in this country. And recall that it is a twofold crisis. We have a public health emergency, which in some places is less of an emergency than it was before. In some places, it's actually just ramping up. But we have this profound public health crisis that is accompanied by an economic crisis. And all of these things have repercussions for what we call in Catholic social teaching the common good, which is the general health of the community, um, of the people who inhabit it? Do they have the means to not only survive but to thrive in as full human persons in their families, in their work, in their neighborhoods? So we're going to continue that conversation on this live stream, and of course we are continuing to cover this pandemic and economic crisis on every platform across American media in the pages of America Magazine. And I wanted to draw your attention to one piece that we have published at americamagazine.org. It is by our senior editor and chief correspondent, Kevin Clark. And he has written a piece that is headlined, "How India's Lockdown and Poor Public Health System Complicate Catholic Hospitals' Struggle Against COVID-19. Like Catholic health providers in everywhere, but especially in the developing world, he examines how people there are concerned about acquiring the basic goods that they need to combat this epidemic. Things like what we've been talking about here in the States, protective equipment for medical teams in their network, maintaining reliable supply lines, and so forth. Those are very serious issues, and we've been grappling with them here in the U.S., certainly here where I am in New York, but places around the world that are deeply impoverished to begin with have additional challenges in meeting this moment, in meeting the challenge, because they have started out from so far behind. That's an important thing to remember. People ask me often, why is America Media and America Magazine one of the only places in the Catholic press today where you can find this kind of international coverage? Well, it has to do with that idea that I talked about earlier, the common good. And the common good, that notion from Catholic social teaching that speaks to the total of conditions that allow for human flourishing, that idea, that doesn't stop at a nation's borders. It should be a global concern. So that's one reason why America, as a ministry of the church, continues to provide international coverage. I also think it's important for Americans in particular, who are citizens of that country that, for good or ill, is at this moment leading the world, that they be informed and know about what is happening in the rest of the world. And then thirdly, perhaps even more important, the church is a global reality. It touches every continent. It inhabits every country. So when we are talking about what is happening at, as Kevin Clark is, at a place like New Delhi or Calcutta, we're not talking only about our fellow human beings. We're also talking about our fellow Catholics, and that is crucial to understanding the global reality that is this vibrant faith called Catholicism. I want to also encourage you to send us questions. If you have any questions about the content that we have at America, why we're choosing to cover something, perhaps you didn't like something that we did at America, or perhaps you did, please do let us know, and let us know on either the Facebook page or Twitter feed where you are watching this live stream, or in the comments section of that content at americamagazine.org. We value your feedback. We value your input, and we value it especially when you ask questions that are critical. When you say that you have concerns about the tack taken by this particular author or that particular author, that helps us to continually refine our editorial approach. Of course, you will always find something that challenges you. That's our job at America. It's to host a conversation with a diversity of voices, to produce content that, yes, affirms you, that, yes, informs you, but also that challenges you. And time and again, we have trusted our readers in those situations with that kind of content. And time and again, they have repaid that trust. and we're most grateful. Please know that we continue to pray for you, our audience. We continue to pray for the church in this country and throughout the world, and for a speedy end to both of these crises. If you want, you can check out all of our coverage at americamagazine.org. You can subscribe to our YouTube page, where you will find all of our video content. And to subscribe to America, you can either go to our webpage or send a text with the word subscribe to 833 Jesuits. That's 833 Jesuits. My thanks for watching today. Please know, as I said, that you are in our prayers, and have a blessed Memorial Day weekend wherever you are. Thanks for watching.